Because my team wins, he said, with that Silicon Valley smirk they must teach at Stanford orientation, just before he slid the termination letter across the table like he was offering me a coupon for a free latte. I didn't blink. I didn't reach for the paper. I just looked at the cheap watch he wore like it was a Rolex and thought, you've got 72 hours before that smile turns into a whimper. 15 years, 3 office moves, 2 acquisitions, 1 near implosion from a race condition that took out the fund transfer scheduler for 6 hours in 2014. I was there for all of it, while he was probably still coding up weather apps with his college roommates in between trips to Burning Man. Now he's chief technology officer because he has a beard, a buzzword vocabulary, and the unshakable confidence of someone who's never deployed a thing that mattered. You've done good work, he added, faux sincere. But the board wants agility. Disruption, speed. Like that time he demoed a containerized architecture diagram with 5 typos and the MongoDB logo upside down. But sure, speed, I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I knew this scene. I'd written this script in my head a dozen times since the energy audit started. When HR added a second person to our one meetings, and his new hire with the $200 sneakers started commenting, why is this still in Perl? On decade-old production scripts. When I saw the new org chart before anyone told me about it, and when I noticed I no longer had access to the financial roadmap folder in Confluence. Clues were everywhere. I just stopped pretending they weren't. They thought I'd beg, cry, ask for a soft landing or some bridge to advisory. Instead, I just said, of course, you're the expert. He blinked at that, maybe a flicker of unease, but I smiled. I smiled like I'd just been told I could finally take my name off the mortgage of a crumbling house. Because what he didn't know, what none of them ever really understood, was that I didn't just work here. I held it together, quietly, invisibly, through 1,000 tiny scripts, patches, duct-taped cron jobs, and undocumented failovers that kept the ship from sinking every damn night. But let's be real for a second, before we go any deeper into the slow-motion tech apocalypse. If you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time. Only 3% of folks who listen are actually subscribed, and smashing that like button helps the team crank out more of these digital car crashes in stereo. All right, sermon over. Back to the fire. You'll get a generous severance, he said, trying to soften the blow, as if the real currency here was money, not credit. He stood to shake my hand. I left him hanging, picked up the envelope, walked out without a word. Behind me, I heard him say to his assistant, loud enough for the room, that's what happens when you don't evolve. Evolve? I built the damn ecosystem. Outside, I didn't cry. I didn't scream into my steering wheel. I just sat in my car, hands on the wheel, and let the silence soak through me like warm static. My phone buzzed, Slack lighting up with half-hearted "will miss you" messages, sad face emojis, and the classic "let's get drinks sometime" from people who hadn't spoken to me in 6 months. I ignored them. Instead, I opened my terminal, typed 3 commands. One to revoke my admin token, cleanly, responsibly. One to wipe my local envars. And one more that did absolutely nothing, unless someone tried to remove a root process without knowing where it started. No booby traps, no malware, just absence. A very specific silence in very specific places. I walked into the kitchen, brewed a cup of dark roast, and finally let my shoulders drop. Tomorrow would be interesting, not for me, for him. The first thing I did was log into Janitor SH. That's what I named it, my little housekeeping script. It wasn't in the deployment tree. Never lived in a repo. Just a quiet demon living in a Docker sidecar, watching logs, tidying memory leaks, and resetting cache pressure when the nightly batch jobs got greedy. Nobody knew it existed. Hell, it wasn't even called by cron. It ran because I told another script to check for a missing file that was only ever deleted by a ghost user named Penny. Penny was my cat. Penny also technically owned 12 backend functions across 3 services, so I let Penny die. I deleted the file, unmounted the volume, and smiled like I'd just pulled the plug on a life support machine no one remembered was still humming. Then came the handover doc. 78 pages of clean, polite, well-organized documentation. All technically correct. All entirely useless if you didn't already know the architecture before we got acquired by that neobank run by crypto bros in pastel hoodies. I even color-coded it, green for standard ops, yellow for monitor closely, red for escalate immediately. But the real magic? The gaping white spaces. No mention of how the payment rails actually recover after a failover. No record of the fallback paths that reroute traffic through our European staging node when AWS eased hiccups. No hint at the auxiliary heartbeat pings that kept our legacy fraud filter from flagging our own transaction processor during high-load spikes. You know, the boring, invisible stuff. The woman stuff. Stuff he said was duct tape thinking and legacy overhead. I added a footnote. These modules were under re-evaluation and may not be necessary post-refactor. Please ensure regression testing is thorough. Translation? Touch them and pray, bro. Meanwhile, I removed myself from the SSO groups with the same reverence you'd use brushing lint off a casket. One by one, billing dashboard, vendor auth, cluster control. Old Nagio's alert dashboard I built in 2012 that still outperformed whatever overpriced observability bloatware they just bought. I let HR schedule the farewell happy hour. Then I canceled. Tired, I said, taking the evening to recalibrate. Truth was, I couldn't stomach the idea of standing in a fake rustic brewery while Greg from BizDev pretended to cry into his IPA. I couldn't listen to the new hires, none of whom knew what I did. Me, how inspiring I was. I couldn't let them hand me a card signed in Sharpie that said things like "Don't be a stranger," and "Your snacks will be missed," like I was a glorified breakroom ghost who microwaved salmon and hoarded Cheez-Its. Instead, I packed my desk in silence. One framed photo, a rubber duck, and a pink post-it that just said, "Nobody notices the load-bearing code until it cracks." I left it stuck under the keyboard in the server lab, right above the main terminal where he'd try to impress the board next week. Walking out, I passed him in the hallway. He didn't say anything. Just did that upward chin jerk like we were pickup buddies at a gym instead of two engineers on opposite ends of an existential battlefield. I gave him a small wave, kept walking. Ghosts don't do goodbyes, they just disappear. Quietly, thoroughly. And if they've done their job right, they leave behind just enough unfinished business to haunt the living. The next morning, 8:03 a.m., right on schedule, he ran the health check script. Well, tried to. It stalled at step 7, validate queue backlog and fraud sifter, then threw a timeout, then a permissions error, then a null return, then it just stopped. I watched the whole thing from my burner Slack account, an old contractor login I created back when we were shorthanded, and legal didn't yet care about strict IAM boundaries. Name on the profile, Tina W. profile pic, an AI-generated woman with librarian glasses and a t-shirt that said "I void warranties." He paced in and out of hashing for status, peppering in the usual nonsense. Any idea why the legacy sifter's stalling? Low prio, just need a patch before the board check-in. One of the junior SREs responded, "That endpoint isn't monitored anymore." Did it move? He replied, "Didn't touch it. Just reran the per-flight. It's probably just brittle. We'll sunset it." Sunset. God, he loved that word. Like decommissioning production code was a romantic farewell on a Hawaiian beach instead of yanking the spine out of a system and wondering why everything downstream starts screaming. He sent another message minutes later, "Heads up. Gonna do a clean sweep on sifter logic after today. Lot of bloat in there." Yes, genius. That bloat was 14 years of production scars, incident workarounds, vendor hotfixes, and the reason our entire fraud pipeline didn't think Sunday night batch loads were a hostile takeover. The real kicker? It was never meant to be run manually. That script he kicked off was a dependency check stub for a dynamic config loader that only existed to prep telemetry syncs for our audit layer. It had one job: whisper to a flag buried 3 directories deep that said green light for upstream. And that flag didn't exist anymore. I'd removed it the moment I wiped Penny. No red flags, no alerts, just silence. Silence that looked like stability until you tried to stand on it. He shrugged in the Slack thread, "No worries. I'll just spoof the telemetry for now." And there it was, the first lie, not a big one, not to the board, not even to the team, just to himself, that this was fine, that he had this. That the system failing to give him a thumbs up was just old tech being dramatic, a hiccup. Meanwhile, in a coffee shop 2 miles away, I sipped a cortado and clicked through Slack like a digital ghost at her own funeral. No need to say anything. No need to intervene, because I knew what he didn't. That script was the canary, and it had just died in the coal mine. He strutted into the boardroom like he owned the damn building. Black button-up, sleeves rolled, overpriced sneakers so white they practically glowed under the conference room fluorescence. He'd shaved that morning. Fresh razor burn lined his neck like his ego had been exfoliated too hard. At 9:01 a.m., the board meeting began. Cameras on. Smiles fake, CFO nodding, one VC sipping something that cost more than my first car. "This morning," he said, voice smooth as startup whiskey, "I'll be showing you the new systems dashboard we've been building. More automation, more visibility, less noise." He clicked his laptop. Big screen projection behind him flickered. Loading, still loading. Dashboard failed to authenticate. "No worries," he chuckled, tapping keys like he was just rearranging furniture. "Let me reroute to the direct backend endpoint." Click. Nothing. Click, click, permission denied. A long, bloated pause swallowed the room. One of the partners leaned forward, squinting. "That the main node?" He cleared his throat. "It's a backup instance. Looks like the auth token may have expired." "No, Chad, that token didn't expire. It died of neglect, screaming into the void while you strutted around like you invented zero downtime deployments." He pulled up a second tab. REST client failed too. 403 forbidden. Backend service didn't even recognize his IP. "This is unusual," he muttered, the edges of his voice starting to fray like a discount hoodie after one dryer cycle too many. "We've been refactoring the auth layers, so a few routes might still be gated." Another board member chimed in. "Didn't you say this was ready yesterday?" "Operationally, yes, just not externally exposed yet." The CFO's brows did this slow, synchronized lift. "The kind that says, 'I know you're full of shit, but I'm letting you walk into your own trap.'" At exactly 9:07, a cascade of system logs began pinging the internal monitoring Slack. Quietly. Background noise for everyone except the people who knew what those codes meant. I was one of them. In my kitchen, in my robe, I watched from my phone while steeping a bag of Earl Grey. No need for screen sharing, just the quiet joy of watching a child try to put together IKEA furniture with no instructions and 6 missing bolts. My stomach fluttered, not from nerves, but from the subtle, carbonated rush of long-delayed vindication. I had set this stage weeks ago. 1,000 tiny choices, removing my name from service owners, turning off failover routes that no longer had an operator, decommissioning the heartbeat that would have told him he was flying blind. He thought I'd left landmines, but I didn't need to. I just took my map with me when I left, and now he was lost. The projector blinked again. Authentication timeout, it said, and beneath that in small gray debug font, expected, root received, guest welcome to the show, Chad, curtains up. At 9:11 a.m., the CTO's hands went from confident piano player movements to full-on guerrilla percussion, palms flat, fingers stabbing, keys bending beneath the force of a man who just realized the audience isn't clapping for his magic trick. The boardroom had gone quiet, not hostile yet, just waiting, like a pack of wolves pausing mid-snarl, letting him writhe a little before they tear the meat off the bone. He pulled out his phone. First call, lead engineer, try to push me elevated access, he barked. My keys being flagged. Second call, DevOps, reset my auth token. Something's cached wrong. Third, security. No, I didn't change my own roles. I have got CTO clearance. From my kitchen, I refreshed the incident dashboard. Alerts blooming like mold in a flooded basement. What he didn't know, his God mode account had been shadow cloned from mine when he took over. But mine had a buried dependency, an old verification service that pinged an IP only I knew to whitelist. And that service had quietly gone dark the moment my severance check cleared. He was writing a skeleton key on a ghost server, and now the ghost was gone. Can we route access through the failover shell? Someone messaged in #inforops. The junior engineer replied, confused, which shell? There's no shell access listed for Prodmaster 2. Another message, is this a routing issue? Feels like a reverse proxy misfire. Then a reply from a terrified SRE. There is no reverse proxy. Not anymore, God bless them. They were trying so hard to explain the supernatural with logic, like toddlers diagnosing poltergeists. Meanwhile, the internal audit logs looked like someone chasing their own tail. Every token refresh failed. Every fallback led to another deprecated call. Error, permissions inheritance unresolved. Auth node path, missing. Token valid equals false. At 9:17, the CTO re-entered the room, no longer trying to hide the sweat. He said, we're experiencing a minor auth sync issue, likely a leftover from our legacy system. Legacy, there it was again, that word he used to describe the backbone of a system that had never failed once during my tenure. I was gripping my mug tighter than I meant to. The ceramic was warm against my palms, but my fingertips buzzed like I'd just touched a live wire. Not from fear, but release. It's happening. The silence, the spiral. Quiet collapse of a man who thought he could step into the cockpit of a plane he didn't build and fly it through a storm with nothing but swagger and slide decks. This wasn't sabotage. This was subtraction. I removed myself. And now the parts that depended on me on the undocumented, unsexy glue I maintained in the dark were just falling. Back in the boardroom, he tried one more time to access the back end. Logged in as admin CTO. Access revoked. Fallback pending. No user found. He stared. Then slowly reached for his phone again. And somewhere deep in the layers of his panic-addled brain, a voice must have whispered my name. Because 5 seconds later, my phone lit up. Unknown number, area code I recognized. I took a long sip of tea, then I smiled and answered. My phone buzzed once, then again. Third ring, I flipped it over. Caller ID, unknown, but I knew the area code. Knew the ringtone I'd set just for numbers out of HQ. Knew the moment would come. I let it ring. Fourth buzz, fifth. The sound filled the kitchen like a smoke alarm before the flames, the kind of sound that makes people flinch. But I just kept stirring honey into my tea. Long, slow circles. The kind of calm that only comes after 15 years of cleaning up someone else's mess with no thanks and no sleep. Sixth ring. I picked up, flat, calm, measured like a bloodless scalpel. Hello, dead air. Then breathing. Then the sound of a man unraveling in real time. Hi, hey, it's me. Look, something's wrong with the back end. I can't get access. The tokens are failing and the dashboards won't load and nobody seems to know why. The engineer said some routing shell is missing and DevOps thinks there's a dead service loop, but nothing's showing in the logs and the board's still sitting here and can you please help me? Please? His voice cracked on that last word. Please. Like he'd suddenly remembered I was a person and not just the insulation he ripped out of the walls during renovation. I let the silence stretch. 3 seconds, 4, then I said it. You'll need to answer my security question. Another pause. What? I took another sip. Let the warmth spread through my chest like the first breath after leaving a cold room. My security question, I repeated, slower now. You want access? You'll need to answer it. He stammered. Wait, what? What question? There's no security. Are you joking right now? I don't joke about root access. He tried again, scrambling. Okay, was it your mother's maiden name? The name of your first pet? What is this? God, the irony. A man who gutted the infrastructure without ever reading the commit history, now grasping for answers to a question that wasn't in any system. I could hear chairs moving in the background, the rustle of panic, board members shifting, whispered what the hell is going on, and him trying to lower his voice like I couldn't already hear the cracks. I need to fix this. I need to get in, I'll credit you. Whatever you want, just what's the question? I looked out my window. The sun had broken through the morning fog, casting a sharp beam across the windowsill like a spotlight. Calm, cold, satisfied, I smiled into the phone. You'll know it when you hear it. Then I hung up and set my phone face down. He called again, didn't leave a voicemail the first time, didn't leave one the second either. Third time, I let it go to speaker. Look, he said, voice tight and shallow, I need to know what the hell you meant. What security question? We're locked out of backend access, the load balancer isn't rotating, and the cron jobs aren't running. No one even knows where they're scheduled from. I could almost hear the flop sweat rolling down his spine, soaking that smug black button-up he'd worn like armor just an hour ago. The armor was cracking. Now he sounded like a college freshman who just found out Git isn't a backup tool. What's the question? He said again. Just tell me the question. I didn't answer right away. My eyes were locked on the photo in front of me, one I'd printed years ago, taped behind my desk, then taken home the day I left. It was a screenshot from our monitoring dashboard in 2016. Total system outage, payment processor failing, customer support flooded, and in the bottom right corner, one lonely green light blinking under a handwritten label, Red Witch Patch. I remembered that night. 3:12 a.m., Red Bull in one hand, bare socket wrench in the other because the server room AC had shorted and the racks were overheating. No one else answered the page. No one else even knew how to fix what broke. That was the first time. Second was when our primary vendor went bankrupt mid-quarter. I hacked a parallel pipeline together over a single weekend using 3 microservices, a dirty Python script, and a backup S3 bucket we weren't supposed to still have access to. Third was the phishing attack. God, that one nearly killed us. I flagged it in the log 6 days before it hit. Escalated to InfoSec, got ignored. So I rerouted the API calls through a sandboxed mirror node, isolated the blast, and had the whole thing cleaned up before the CFO even knew we'd been targeted. That was the last time I warned anyone about anything. Back in the kitchen, I finally spoke. The question is simple, I said, voice steady. What's the name of the person who saved this company 3 times? Silence. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just flat, dead silence. Could practically hear the gears grinding in his overconfident brain, trying to scrape together an answer from the PR decks and Slack channels he never read. I don't know, he finally said. It came out quiet, almost honest. Exactly, I said, and this time I didn't hang up. I just let the line stay open. Let him sit in it. Let the realization crawl up the back of his neck and settle like frostbite in his jaw. 'Cause he never learned my name the way he learned buzzwords. Never asked how the patches got made, only why they weren't shiny enough. Never cared who kept the lights on, only that they stayed on. Now they were flickering. By 9:38 a.m., the room had gone from quiet curiosity to that special kind of panic you only see on Wall Street when a CEO starts using phrases like strategic repositioning. The CTO was still hunched over his laptop, fingers fluttering uselessly across the keys like a magician fumbling a trick after the rabbit bit him. The screen refused to yield, backend blocked, audit logs looping, uptime reports offline, cron jobs silent like a tomb. Let's pause here, said the chairman of the board, voice clipped and irritated, and revisit something that's been bothering me. The CTO froze. You said the transition was complete, that everything was modernized. So explain this. Why is the system tied to credentials no one can access? Why are key failovers missing? And most importantly, why was the person who apparently built all this let go without knowledge transfer? Eyes turned toward him. One of the junior board members leaned forward. Wait, are you saying she was the only person who knew how the core systems worked? He stammered. No, we had documentation. I mean, her notes were adequate. There must have been undocumented anomalies. Probably legacy artifacts. She didn't always follow best practices. We had to streamline things. Across the table, a voice finally cut through the fog. It was Nathan, mid-level engineer. Quiet, loyal, always a little too polite for the job. He looked around the table, then at the CTO, and said flatly, we don't even know where the cron jobs are scheduled from. Silence. Then someone added, wait, how is that possible? Nathan shrugged, we've looked. There's no entry in Jenkins, nothing in Lambda. Nothing in the deployment YAMLs, it just works or worked. Until now, someone else muttered she ran everything, didn't she? The CTO tried to stand taller. No, she hid everything, that's the problem. She refused to standardize. Bullshit, said another voice. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It was the head of InfoSec. Logs say otherwise. Her commits were clean, every change tagged, every rollback documented. You wanted her out and you got your wish. The CTO's face turned that particular shade of ash gray that only appears when a man realizes the room is no longer on his side. One of the board members sighed and opened his laptop. Pull the internal audit logs. Let's see the final access trail. Click, scroll, pause. She removed her token, the board member said cleanly. No tampering, no traps, just walked away. Another said so. This isn't sabotage. InfoSec again, colder now, no. This is what happens when your foundation leaves and you don't realize it was the foundation. No one said anything for a long time. Then the chairman asked the question the CTO must have dreaded since sunrise. So, what's your plan? He opened his mouth, closed it. In the end, all he said was, we'll rebuild. And somewhere in my living room, curled up on the couch with the dog in my lap and an open laptop glowing softly across the table, I let out the smallest laugh. Not loud, not cruel, just a quiet breath of something that tasted like justice, because I didn't need to be there to speak. My absence did all the talking. 2 days later, I got the email, not from the CTO, he wouldn't dare. It was from Lillian Tran, a board member I'd only ever spoken to once in passing, during a hallway fire drill where she complimented my boots and asked where the vending machines were. Subject, consulting opportunity tone, we value your historical insight. Translation, please come fix the thing we broke pretending we didn't need you. She offered a generous rate, 6 figures for 30 days of handholding. No pressure, no meetings, just a clean contract and a hope that I still remembered how to save them from themselves. I didn't even hesitate. I declined, politely, graciously. Then I opened my laptop, private repo. Folder name, Atlas Bones, because that's what it was, the invisible skeleton that held everything upright. I opened the documentation files one by one, not the sanitized ones, not the HR-approved version I left behind. The real files, hand-drawn system maps. Function notes with sarcasm buried between the semicolons. Patch history for a bug that never made it to Jira, because I fixed it before the PM even knew it existed. Inline comments like, // fix for that Friday night crash, no one wanted to talk about // this route only breaks when someone uses a Samsung fridge as a browser. I took screenshots of every file. Each module. Each invisible thread they'd been walking across like a tightrope they never knew was fraying. Then I zipped the whole archive, encrypted it, titled it Oblivion README, and I archived it. Not to share, not for blackmail, just to remember, to remind myself I was the architect. Meanwhile, the company issued a press release. We are currently experiencing intermittent system issues due to a previously undiscovered configuration drift. Our engineers are working around the clock to restore services. Translation, we pissed off the wrong witch. I closed the browser. Opened the admin panel one last time. True admin panel. The one no one else ever asked about because they didn't know it existed. A clean black terminal blinking softly, waiting for the final command. I hovered over the button labeled Delete Master Token, then below it another toggle, Purge Security question. I pressed both. No fanfare, no sound, just gone. The back door closed. The last trace of me, erased from their world like chalk off a sidewalk before a rainstorm. I leaned back in my chair, let the silence wrap around me like a weighted blanket. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt light, because I hadn't destroyed them. They did that all on their own. I just made sure they couldn't blame the ghost. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.